Morning.
Morning.
My name is Don, and I'm here with Marianne Pizzitola from the Organization of Public Service Retirees. Just to summarize briefly, Marianne's retired NYPD and NYC EMS worker. Marianne is talking with Staten Islander news organization today about the whole, fiasco with the unions and the health coverage. We all have family members in unions on Staten Island, neighbors. Staten Island's a very union-heavy place.
Yes,
So this
it
is information our readership definitely needs to know, and I'm not sure that everybody really is in the loop on this. Like, I think a lot of people just don't know what's happening. So just to summarize again, it's all about NYC conspiring with the unions to sell off the retirees' benefits. Who benefits from this? Who gains? We definitely know who loses, and it's all the city workers who have, worked and retired. So, just to start off, Marianne, it's good to see you today. Hope you're having a nice holiday season. Hope you're accomplishing a lot with the goals that you set out for. What did you do as a city worker?
I was in EMS. I worked in originally when I was hired. I went to the Bronx. I was working out at Jacoby, and later Queens and Astoria for a little while, and then ended in Brooklyn.
Okay, and that's a demanding job, of course.
Yes,
Like, you'll know that that's one of the most high intensity jobs, stress and everything. So you worked and you retired and everything. Okay. So this is a question of what a union is. Are unions what we think they are? Who does a union represent? Who should a union represent? We've looked over your various interviews. So you said unions don't represent retirees, but rather active employees. You said unions negotiate for those with wages, hours, and working conditions. Just to say briefly, and then you could speak. However, a good amount of what unions do is making promises to workers about their future, about their retirement. This is why some people take jobs that have lower wages to get benefits into retirement. This just means no active workers should ever necessarily trust the promises made by unions regarding retirements, as they can just be ignored, especially in this generation, as elders are not always so internet savvy. I think we're at a special time where the younger generation is in the loop, and maybe the elder people don't know all this stuff. Is this elder abuse? Is this ageism? Just opportunism, predation by the insurer? So, what's happening? Why is this being privatized, and who's saving costs? What's like a brief summary you could tell some of the people who aren't up to date on this?
So thank you for looking into some of the things that I've said in the past. I wish other people did that. Unions, you're correct, legally, under the Taylor Law and New York City collective bargaining, can only represent those with wages, hours, and work conditions. And since a retiree doesn't have that, they technically don't represent us. However, that never stopped them before from protecting a retiree's future, because they always knew that one day they would be retired. So it just made common sense. You would never harm a retiree's benefits, because that will one day be you. And yet this is the exact situation we are in. And this did start in 2014, when the United Federation of Teachers negotiated a contract that they hadn't had for 9 years under the Bloomberg administration. And they did so by partially funding that on the backs of all the other unions in the city and retirees. Michael Mulgrew's own video from September says that he told the city said to him, if you give us back that Medicare eligible retirees health plan, that 20%, we'll give you the money and you could put it in your welfare fund. Ouch, because I had never ever heard that happen before. But it creates a couple problems. It's a problem for those that believe in labor, the labor movement, unionism. It's a concern for management, because while management, I believe, did collude to allow this to happen, it also will now affect the city of New York's ability to attract and maintain people that will stay in the city, because now their fear is, if they're watching this, well, why would I want to spend 20, 30, 40 years with you when I could be retired and then you're going to sell off everything I earned?
Right.
It makes no sense.
What was the 600 million figure that was thrown around?
So the $600 million figure in the 2020 RFP, the request for proposal that the city put out to prospective vendors, it said that their belief was that the total cost of retiree health care, meaning medical and hospitalization, was about $600 million, and that they were looking to wipe it off their balance sheet. And by putting it under Medicare Advantage, which is federally subsidized by Medicare, and yes, you hit the right word on the head, it is privatization. I say this to Michael all the time. I said, you're against privatization of education via charter schools. That is a public benefit. So is your Medicare. Why would you be against charter schools, but not against privatizing your healthcare? To me, this makes no sense.
Right. So why, I know you guys have started a lawsuit, and that's in the New York State Supreme Court.
So we started that case in August of 21. We won in March of 22. The city appealed it the very next day, and we got that decision from the appellate court, which was a unanimous decision in November. So far, the city has not appealed that to the high court. Yet we did file another lawsuit against the city in Supreme Court that the co-pays that they instituted in January of 22 violates our contract. And if they go to well, the next step would be if they go to take away anything else, we'll be back in court with them.
Okay. I recall seeing that you guys were told that the union doesn't represent you when you try to file a grievance, because some suggested that retirees file a union grievance. So what happened with that?
So in the early days of this lawsuit, the first lawsuit in August, Alan Klinger, who is the attorney for the Municipal Labor Committee, which is the umbrella organization for all of the unions in the city, and he ironically also is the same attorney for Local 831, Harry Nispoli Sanitation, the UFT, and Emblem Health. He said we didn't know what we were doing. Basically, we were ignorant. We just should have filed a grievance. And I was like, really? We're retired. You can't file a grievance. So I said, all right, let's play along with this. So at the time, we were a young organization. I only at the time had about, I think, 4,000 or 5,000 people in our Facebook page. Now we're about 20,000. And so he said, I said to all of our members, let's call our old unions and say, hey, we want to file a grievance. And every one of our unions said, you can't file a grievance. You're retired. We don't represent you.
Okay, so the retirees were sent down a path that leads to nowhere, basically.
Right. Well, we were still going forward with the litigation because we knew we had no right. We had no right to. Do
you think they were trying to discourage the retirees from the litigation? Like maybe try to put an end to that and just reroute the whole thing to an end, basically?
Yes, and also to minimize the importance of what we were doing. I mean, the entire time, if you look at everything that the UFT and the MLC and DC37 have put out, they have minimized our group. They still today call us a small group of dissenting retirees, Johnny-come-latelys, rump retirees, and yet, hello, we were you. We were in your unions. We built your unions. We built this city. After 9/11, we rebuilt this city. And yet they want to minimize us. We absolutely know the law. We know our Constitution. It's crazy.
Okay, I'm going to skip ahead to something I was going to leave for the end because it's pretty important. How do affected people, their families, get involved? What are some of the things they could take steps? Like, let's say you're an NYC city worker who's retired and you're watching this and you don't know anything about this. What would you suggest that they do?
Well, right now the unions are spreading a disinformation campaign to change the administrative code, which would have to happen in the city council. So we're asking everyone, families, in service, retirees, everybody, to contact the city council and tell them not to change the administrative code, because that is the one thing we all have that protects us equally across the board. It sets the benchmark cap of what the city has to pay up to, and it protects us all on the same level. This is what the MLC is trying to change. We have been advocating that it must stay the same. It was put in place for a purpose in 1967, which was to provide equal benefits for everybody.
Okay. to have a nice retirement means a person has to prepare. It's inevitable that the situation is going to happen. You're going to have to survive somehow. So people found jobs with benefits. They saved carefully. Some of these jobs are difficult. City jobs like what you said, being an MS worker, it's definitely, from what I've seen from people I know, it's one of the most high stress, high intensity jobs out there. So NYC workers, they put the time in, no matter what the job was, they put the time in, they did the job, they did it well enough to retire and not be fired, so now it's time to reap the fruits of those labors. It makes sense. So this is really a big issue. It doesn't exactly make sense to me, listening to this, how this is their plan. The city's trying to save some money, but they basically negate what the unions are in the process.
Right. So that was probably one of the hardest things that we had to face, was coming out against our own unions for doing this to us. And it still is one of the hardest things to say. I am literally on a daily basis having to challenge why my union has lost its compass and is okay with privatizing healthcare, stripping away my choice, gaslighting us on a daily basis, to where even District Council 37, which is our parent union, Henry Garrido, has all of his 100 locals say that I am a union buster. No, I'm not union buster. I am union. I am labor.
Okay. I'm glad you're saying that you're clearing that up. That's important.
Yes, because it's disturbing to me that I am having to say this, because I shouldn't have to be fighting my own union to stop privatization of healthcare and taking away something I earned and paid for. And this is what they don't understand, especially that they're selling off our healthcare for their raises today. I will never advocate that you shouldn't have a raise, but damn, it shouldn't be on my back, and you shouldn't be selling out what we earned, we paid for, we gave up years of zero zeros for. And you're in Staten Island, you've got a heavy police and fire residents. They remember under the Giuliani administration very clearly, because that was the last time we gave up 2 years of zero zeros from 95 to 97. We earned this.
Right. So these were benefits that were promised to active workers. It was promised to you when you were a worker. So it doesn't make sense to me that now that you're retired, they're putting all of you in a different category. You're still workers. You're just retired workers.
Yes.
It's confusing. I mean, and I've heard about this before learning about the work you're doing from family members who are NYC retired workers. And, they were concerned. A lot of people have health issues, and, it's an affordability issue, really. It's not about anything else.
I held a meeting yesterday for 3 hours with active teachers cycling in and out, and they didn't even know in retirement they don't get raises. And I said, well, you get a cost of living increase. It's an adjustment, but it's an adjustment. And it's only between 1% and 3% of the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, on the first $18,000 of your pension. So you do the math. You're the teacher. I said to her, this year, I think we got the highest ever. We got 3%. I don't ever remember seeing 3. It's usually like 1. And so I said, now you do the math, that 3% at $18,000, is that going to make you any richer than it was last year, especially when we're at 9% inflation? No. So even cops and firefighters, we have a lot of retirees that retired in the 70s. Their top pay in 1978 was $15,000. So these guys are like pushing their 80s at this point. At $15,000 top salaries, a 50% pension, even with cost of living increases, you do the math.
Oh, that's crazy. That's not unbelievable.
Yes, and so those were our heroes from the 70s. Now you've got today's civilians, which is DC37's retirees, where I fall under. Even though I was fire, I'm EMS. I'm still considered civilian because they never respectfully gave EMS parity. So you have DC37 retirees that 2/3 of them make under $25,000 pensions, and 1/3 of those under $12,000. I did an interview with a crossing guard, a 35-year crossing guard. Her pension take home is $882 a month. A $200 premium on a city health plan that pays for less than 20% of Medicare eligible plans. That is insane. She would never be able to afford a pay up option like Mr. Mulgrew calls it ever. $200 would bankrupt her.
Okay. Were you active with your union while you were an active worker? What role did you play?
So I was a delegate in Local 2507, DC37 EMTs and paramedics, and I was also their benefit consultant. I helped them with their health benefits, pension benefits. When after 9/11, I became a 9/11 advocate. I helped with the Zaroga Act. We helped secure 9/11 health benefits and help people do their pensions and disability applications.
Okay. How has legacy media, mainstream media handled this? Are you getting a lot of coverage, and is it fair coverage?
I wish we had more coverage. It's pretty much, I think we've been doing our own PR. We have our own YouTube channel. We have a Facebook. We have a Twitter. We have an Instagram. And one of our grandmas told me I had to get on TikTok, so now I got that too. Media, as in your professional media, I have some. We've your articles. We have the New York Focus, some of the Daily News, some from Work Bites, which is another labor group. This morning we were mentioned in Portside, which is pretty huge, I think. But running this where this really should have a broad spectrum attention, as this is not just a city thing, this is a nationwide trend that because of these federal subsidies and someone's agenda to privatize Medicare and a federal rule that was changed that permitted employers and unions to auto-enroll people who are Medicare eligible into these types of Medicare Advantage plans without their permission, this is why we are here. So when you start hearing talking points that say, well, it must be great, there's almost 50% of America is in Medicare Advantage, it's not because they wanted to be there. It was because of this federal rule change that happened with no open comment period or hearings that allowed for people to be able to, organizations, municipalities, unions, to auto-enroll them into these plans, taking the full cost of the insurance off of their balance sheet and throwing it onto the federal government. That's insane.
Okay.
And it's insane that the AFL-CIO and AFSCME, DC37, UFT, MLC are all okay with that.
Okay, you actually got into my next question. Maybe briefly, because I know it's probably many pages. What is Medicare Advantage, and how does that figure into what they're trying to do with you guys?
So Medicare Advantage is privatized Medicare. It started under the Clinton administration, and it was supposed to be an option for people. And it always was an option. It was never something you were forced into. And I honestly think it should stay that way. Unfortunately, there are a lot of problems with it that will affect a lot of people, especially in that generation. So traditional Medicare, you don't have prior authorizations, meaning you don't need to go, your doctor doesn't need to get permission to do a test or a procedure. Medicare Advantage, you do. I know Michael Mulgrew likes to discount that, but shame on him because this causes a harm to people, which the Office of the Inspector General, Health and Human Services has learned, also put out their reports for 18 and 22 that this is a fact. There's also narrowed networks. You have 94% of the doctors in America that accept Medicare. The 6% that don't are typically psychiatrists. In Medicare Advantage, you have to use their doctors in their network. Even if their network is broad, like for example, in the lawsuit that we brought, 25% of the doctors in America were not in that plan. They admitted that in our court case. And 10% of the doctors that retirees were currently seeing weren't accepting the plan. And then Michael will say a talking point was, well, you can go outside the network because it's a PPO. But see, the problem is, yes, you can use outside network doctors, but if the doctor refuses to accept reimbursement by the insurance company, you have to pay that bill up front and submit it to the insurance company for reimbursement. When you do that, you're technically asking them for medical necessity approval, and if they don't think it's medically necessary, guess what? It gets denied and you're on the hook for the bill. So there's a lot of problems with Medicare Advantage. There's so many more because you could do a whole show just on that alone. We have a full one-pager on the differences. You can have no coordination of insurance, and that even includes your veterans. You can't use your TRICARE on your medical. Private drug plans. Many people need private drug plans. You can't use those on Medicare Advantage either, which means now you're on the hook for all of those drugs if they're not covered by your welfare fund which we learned in this as well, many are not. So insurance is inherently confusing. And you're right, when you started this by saying many of us are not tech savvy, that retirees are not tech savvy, they would have no way of finding out about this until they were in need and then had to figure out, now you're sick and you have to fight it. And that's not fair.
No, this seems immoral. It seems
It
immoral.
is, like, good word.
So, you said that you guys are gaslighted online. I see a lot of debunkers. Has anyone been actually lying, outright lying to the retirees?
Yes, actually, I got a text message from a lady who's a teacher whose husband is in DC37, and DC37 put out a mass text blast 2 days ago. And the text says, "Hi, it's DC37. An arbitrator ruled we must amend the Administrative Code 12-126 to keep our healthcare premium free. Will you call your counsel?" And I'm going, holy cow, that's not true. The arbitrator, this is the man who is an arbitrator. He was asked to put out an opinion. He even writes it is a recommendation. It's not legally binding. It's not a ruling, but yet he's scaring people to think exactly that. They've put up blog posts. DC37 has put up blog posts, and so has Michael Mulgrew and the MLC. But 2 days ago in the UFT Delegates Assembly meeting, he actually admitted when confronted by his members that this paper that was put out by Martin Scheinman, arbitrator, is only an opinion and not a ruling. So how could you keep lying to the people you're supposed to be protecting? It makes no sense.
Right, and these are the people that the retirees had come to count on, of course. So they probably don't think twice and even wonder if this is not true. You know, I guess up until now, your union was good to you guys, and so people aren't going to be skeptical, I would think.
Well, because it took us a real hard time. When we first heard about this, the first place we went to was our union. We were like, hey, did you hear this? Like, are you going to fight this? What are they doing to us? And then we learned that they were part of this, and we were like, ooh, now what? Like, what do we do? Like, these were supposed to be the people that were our gatekeepers. They were the protectors. And then now I'm having to fight you? This made no sense to us. And yes, you're right. Today's employees that are finally listening to our message and our fight, even though it has been in the paper and on social media, there are many people that still, this is the first time they're hearing it. They are where we were a year and a half ago, recognizing that their unions sold off their future health care, are currently trying to replace their current health care. And Mulgrew in his meeting, really ballsy said, well, you elected me to be your leader, so I should be able to make whatever decisions I think are correct without bringing it to the group.
Right, that's probably elevating himself higher than his position, realistically. I mean,
yeah. How'd that work out for other people? Didn't work too well.
So just as an aside, healthcare costs are skyrocketing, but let's keep in mind that the U.S. is, as far as my statistics go that I looked at, second in the world in terms of per capita cost, yet number 37 in total healthcare effectiveness or quality. So maybe there's something wrong with the way the healthcare system is set up, and they're trying to essentially rob you guys when the problem is the healthcare system, the insurers. Somehow this is all, how it all fits together doesn't fit together. That seems like that's really the problem, is we have some issues with the healthcare system, and rather than fixing that, they're just going to hide it in ways that really don't make sense and aren't fair to retired workers. You're still a worker. You're just a retired worker. It doesn't make you not a worker because you're finished with your job, So do you think that anyone would be bankrupted by this or might lose their homes? Like, do you think any retired city workers might really be impacted if this all passes and this is how it goes?
I believe people will be impacted. I have said this before. I personally cannot afford to pay $200 a month for my healthcare plus $15 copays. I would not. I was talking to our attorney about this the other day. I believe at that point, based on my healthcare issues, I would probably have to sell my house and move. And I shouldn't have to do that because I should be able to stay here. And my pension isn't even as low as half of the people that I'm trying to protect. Like Miss Sally at $882, she has to live with her granddaughter. So if she were forced to either take Medicare Advantage or for free or pay to be in her plan, she couldn't afford to pay to be in senior care. She would have no choice. So it's disingenuous of Michael Mulgrew to say that you can have a choice, you just have to pay for it. Well, I had a teacher tell me that when I looked her up on See Through New York, she makes like a $77,400 pension. Sally doesn't make. I don't make a $70,000 pension. God bless the people that do make $77,000 pensions. Let them pay up. For the rest of us, leave our health benefits alone. And I don't understand why even they are okay with having their benefits sold off. That shouldn't be okay either, even though they are high earners. I disagree with that completely.
Okay. Now here, the Municipal Labor Council or Municipal Labor Committee, what is that and how did that get involved in this whole thing?
So the Municipal Labor Committee was founded in like 1966, 67, and it is based in the administrative code and in New York City collective bargaining. And it was meant to be an umbrella organization of unions. We've been trying to find out more of how they operate. We foiled information from New York City Office of Labor Relations, and at first they denied our FOILs, our Freedom of Information requests. Then when we pushed back and appealed, they sent us old documents from 1966. We asked who was in it. They refused to tell us. They told us it's secret. How is it secret when you're negotiating collective bargaining agreements with taxpayer dollars and that's secret? And they still today won't give us a list of who's in it.
That's unbelievable. How could that be?
I'll send you the FOIL. They then sent me a document that was their guidelines, it's almost like their constitution. And what disturbed me is that it looks like it hasn't been updated since 2008, and also they have a weighted voting system that requires one vote for every 250 members. Well, when the MLC was founded, DC37 Victor Gottbaum was the head of the MLC because he was the largest union at the time. In order to get a 2/3 vote to pass a motion, Victor would have to have a lot of unions on his side to pass the motion. Today is very different. Today you have other unions that were not in it at its inception, like TWU 100, Local 3, and UFT was not in it either. Al Shanker got in later. So now you have the two largest unions in the city that together, the UFT and DC37, make up 2/3 of the vote. You just need these two unions, not the other 100 something behind them. They could pass any motion they want to, and this is why this keeps happening. And no one pushes back and no one fights it. And the funny thing is in the documents, it says that if you want out of the organization, all you have to do is write them a letter and tell them you're going to stop paying union dues. Well, we spoke to a few unions that stopped paying dues to the MLC. They're still bound by what they do. It's like the mafia, you're never out.
It's really strange that there's some shady group that's pretty much like in the middle of all this, that was waiting in the wings for decades and decades. And now all of a sudden we're hearing about them. I thought that you'd have more info on this. It's so strange because I couldn't really find out anything. And it seemed like, who are these people and where do they get the authority to interject themselves into the middle of this discussion?
Well, the law, the administrative code and the city collective bargaining law allows them to do citywide bargaining. So your units, your individual unions do their unit contracts that would affect their people. But then the citywide agreement is like your health benefits and your sick days, vacation days, the things that affect you on a citywide basis. That was what they were supposed to do. But if you talk to like the PBA, every time there's a vote, the PBA, they don't vote, they abstain because they don't believe that the MLC has the power that it's yielding.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so reach out to Pat Lynch about that and get him to get on the record as like, well, you abstain, but why haven't you ever caused a resolution, a revolution to get out of the MLC or push back? Because this is how this happened. Michael didn't have a contract in 2014. His unit agreement gave him an 18% wage, but he had to get the MLC to agree to give $1 billion from the stabilization fund back to the city to offset that years of collective bargaining. And his own contract actually says it in like provision H, I think 8. And it says like, you will convey $1 billion from the health insurance stabilization fund to offset the cost of this agreement. And he also had to get the MLC to agree to healthcare savings on a recurring basis. It was the first time that a union itself, teachers union, any union, negotiated a contract that was partially funded by somebody else. And the MLC, because he is one of the 2 largest unions that could pass that vote, what did he go? Hey, Henry, I need your vote. Let's pass this motion and get me my raises. And then you just got to agree to doing healthcare savings and give me $1 billion from the health fund for raises. I'm like, seriously? And no one yelled at that? No one pushed back?
So do you think in the future it might be a good idea to try and advocate for the elimination of the MLC?
Well, and so, I don't think that'll ever happen. I think because this is what I've suggested. There's 2 things. Either an elimination of the MLC as it currently exists and form MLC 2.0, because you're still going to need a mechanism to do citywide bargaining, right? So, but hopefully it would be more democratic like it used to, where I think there should be 1 union, 1 vote. And when I confronted Mulgrew about this when we were at Somos in San Juan in November, he said, I will never give up my power. Well, dude, that really speaks volumes, because you were making a decision that impacts unions behind you that don't agree with you. In that September vote of the 102 unions that were on that roll call vote, 40 didn't even show up. That tells me there's apathy. In his own election, he had, I think, 150,000 eligible ballots went out. I think only 50,000 came back in. To me, again, screams apathy. They're disenfranchised. You've lost your people.
Okay, is there anyone in government that's fighting with you and that's on the side of the retirees?
The city council recognizes that what they're trying to be sold to do by the unions is a non-starter, because what the one failure of today's union leaders is that they failed to realize that the changes that they are demanding upon them are their health care. This affects the council. This affects every civil servant. This even affects the mayor. The mayor's not even listening to us because he's being swayed by OMB, Office of Management and Budget, Ken Godner. Ken is the guy that he's the bean counter for the city that prices out all the collective bargaining agreements. Him, Robert Lynn from OLR, the guy that retired and gets paid $500 an hour as a consultant, because I guess OLR doesn't know what the hell they're doing. These are the people that are making these really bad decisions. That's what's putting us here. There's ways of getting out of this. Look, they made a really bad deal in 2014, right? I'm not even saying you've got to admit that you made a mistake. I'm basically saying, hey, this has been fraught with issues from the beginning. It's been litigated multiple times. It's been in 2 courts and you're going back to court. Clearly, the people are telling you they don't want this. And when you made this agreement, you never even planned that there would be any pushback. Usually when they do agreements like this, there's some sort of a blow-up clause. There was no blow-up clause, meaning if all these things you had to do to get into place in order to get your way didn't happen, what would you do? So the prudent person should basically be saying at this point, you're being lied to, this didn't work, bad things happened, let's go back to the table, maybe this was a bad idea. Call it a mulligan, let's do a do-over, we'll have a do-over. But no one's thinking rationally. They're just digging their heels in the sand. The mayor's office is refusing to meet with us. OMB, at a meeting last week, the guy just sat on his cell phone, wouldn't even acknowledge me. When we asked about savings, when we told him what we found, and we also told him about fiduciary failures, mayor's office representative that was there said to OMB, to Ken, did you know that these things happened? Or did you know that these were savings options? Did you know about these fiduciary failures she's bringing to our attention? And Ken said, well, we knew about some of them and some we didn't. Well, if you knew about some of them, why didn't you do something about it? And if you didn't know about the others, why are you telling the mayor's office and the city council nothing else exists except stealing retirees' healthcare plans? This makes no sense. This is why we're angry.
Okay. The attorney that was selected by your organization, how did you choose that attorney? What what drew you to that person, and do you think they'll be effective?
We have two attorneys. We have Steve Cohen from Pollock Cohen, and we have Jake Gardner from Walden, Mocht, and Harron. They're wonderful attorneys. Jake was even a former firefighter from New York City, so he clearly gets the civil service aspect. Steve was suggested to us, referred to us when in the early days of this case, because I was already working with a state attorney that did state civil service, who was retired and couldn't litigate. And then he also ironically referred me to the same person. So that's how I met Steve. And then a retired fire captain referred me to Jake. We put the two of them together, and we've had the most amazing legal team ever.
Okay. I remember listening to some of your other interviews saying you accepted 0 raises on contracts. This is setting a precedent such that if it goes forward and you guys lose, it doesn't seem that unionized workers really have representation. Why would anyone ever forego, raises in the present or compensation in the present for something in the future?
So we were told at the time, again, under Giuliani, there was no money in the budget and that we had a choice. It was like either selling out the unborn, giving up. You didn't ever really want to do that. Our generation didn't agree with selling out the unborn. We still don't, which is why you'll never hear that come out from my mouth. We did a rally, and one of the guys at the rally is an older gentleman said, "I'm used to work under the Koch administration. You should just sell out the unborn. That will be effective." And I said, "No, it won't. That's why we have tier 6. Like, the state advocated for you to diminish the state plan. They had to go back and fix it. Like, that's not an answer. It's an easy road." We did that because our generation was okay with taking lower wages. We always knew that we wouldn't get paid well, but we took our future benefit as like a deferred compensation. And we were fine with that because we knew that there would be a day. Our generation was raised with our grandparents. So we knew we should plan for our future. I'm young, I'm healthy, I could do more. Let me do that now. And then later I'll be okay and I can finally rest. Well, you just dragged 250,000 people out of retirement to fight you back to make sure we keep what we earn. That should never have been. And that's why we did that. We chose to protect our futures. We were okay with tightening our belts for a year or two. And maybe that's the message for today's unions. I know it sucks. You're coming out of COVID. You're working your rear ends off. You want to raise. Inflation's crappy, but you don't steal from the people that built your union.
What concerns me also, and this is a difficult issue, but you said that it's systemic, not only affecting NYC retirees. What do you think the implications are for our society? We headed back to, a time essentially before unions. I mean, where the unions will be here, but they won't be effective because, they'll be subverted by all these, councils. And what have you got to say about that?
That is one of my greatest fears is labor. This will harm labor. This will harm the labor movement. That what really then do I need you for if you are going to sell me out when I need you most? Or when by past practice and tradition, after all my years of service, you did protect me and now you're not. And now you're not even listening to me. It doesn't make me feel comfortable, to be honest with you. And out of everything in society that is you'll see it all over, anti-labor movement everywhere. This is probably one of the most hottest contested years in labor, where you're seeing more labor strikes around this country than I think I've ever read about or seen since the 60s. Like this is not, I think the last strike New York City had was with Roger Toussaint in like 06 with transit when he shut down the city and then went to jail for like 4 days. You've not seen this. This is saying labor's not happy. We're not happy where it is. But then now, if I'm telling labor at the same time, watch your back because they're going to sell you out later. You don't want to believe that. You really don't.
Yeah, they should take you guys seriously. Yeah, because the precedent that's being set really invalidates the role of a union. I mean, why do you pay dues to your union if there's this other council that has so much power, and it's ludicrous. I mean, it doesn't seem reasonable. Listening to all this, clearly they're trying to save money. The city's trying to get out of a debt, or trying to reduce its debt by making the retirees pay, essentially all those raises that you didn't take. Essentially, now the city is getting that if they go forward with this. It's really strange. So,
well, and the Municipal Labor Committee also makes a practice of filing amicus briefs in court cases that unions file against the city, but the MLC takes the side of the city, not the union. Talk to Pat Lynch about that as well. This blows my mind, because when the MLC did that to us, wrote an amicus brief, meaning a friend of the court, for the city's side, why would labor, under the umbrella organization, which Pat Lynch is a part of, why would that organization write a brief in support of management?
this sounds a lot like what people were talking about death panels a while ago. I know that wasn't necessarily, like, there was a lot of talk about it wasn't the case, but denying services that are necessary to a patient, death panel, it does just a colloquial term, or, some kind of term people made. Essentially, it is determining whether a person can live well or continue to live in pain or whatever else, or even perish,
Yeah, so here's a good one for that. Under the GHI comprehensive benefit plan for the active workers in service and under 65 retirees, the MLC instituted series and continuously institutes prior authorizations, which becomes those quote unquote death panels. Well, there is a case, and you can search this. Her name was Kathleen Ballantini, and that case is still going on. Kathleen Ballantini's husband is a retired police officer living in the Carolina area. Several years ago, she had pain in her hip, went to the doctor. The doctor wanted to do an MRI. The GHI said, no, prior authorization denied, go to PT, 6 weeks. So she went to PT for 6 weeks. After 6 weeks, pain was still there. Doc said, look, sorry, I'm really sorry, Kathleen, we got to do this MRI now. We got to file it again. File it, GHI denies it, says do PT. And the doctor said, GHI, you already had us do PT for 6 weeks and paid for it. Like, it's time for the MRI. They denied it. That doctor had to appeal it. By the time it went through the channels and she finally got the MRI, she had cancer in her hip. She went to Sloan Kettering in Manhattan. They said to her, I wish you came to us 30 days earlier, because then we wouldn't have to do chemotherapy and amputate your leg, hip, and pelvis.
Okay. With the lawsuit, there has been a restraining order that the judge has made against the city. Is that the case? Did I get that right?
The restraining order at the time from March was to not force us into the Medicare Advantage plans until everything was mitigated. So he stopped everything to keep the status quo, and then we went on to litigate the case. At the end of the case, he lifted the restraining order and said, you can go ahead with doing, offering that plan, but you can't force those retirees to pay for a plan that falls under the benchmark cap that the city's obligated to pay up to.
Okay, and I also found something that talked about how they reneged on a promise to pay the insurance of spouses of officers lost in the line of duty.
So 12-126 also covers insurance for line of duty spouses. So that's why our fear is knowing the history of 12-126, knowing that mayors Beam, Mayors Koch, and Mayors Giuliani, and Mayor de Blasio all tried to take away benefits under 12-126, that if you open the code, like we always say, don't open the state constitution because bad things can happen. If you open the code, you are now allowing and setting a precedent that you're okay with it being diminished. Today, you want to take away the benchmark that the city has to pay up to for all of our plans. Tomorrow, you're coming after the other thing that 12-126 also offers, which we know the city has been trying to get rid of since 1977, is Medicare B reimbursement. And yet you still have holdovers, like from the Koch administration, like Kenneth Godner from OMB, Robert Lynn, who was from Labor Relations in 1978. You still have retired, like Stan Brezanoff is that former deputy mayor under Koch. He doesn't like 12-126 either and believes we should all be on premium. So these are people that are working against labor, and yet they work for the city. But hell, they make $150,000 pension, so God bless them.
Okay, that's pretty much all my questions. Is there anything that you'd like to say to our audience? Just like I said, we have a lot of city workers who read our news. So
yes, so join our organization, New York City Organization of Public Service Retirees. We have a website at www.nycretirees.org. We have a YouTube channel. We're on all social media under the name of our organization or NYC Retirees. And join our organization. Make a donation because we are in this litigation for our lives. We started out with a donation request of $25. We've never asked for more. Those that can give more, give more. Those give what they can. We have little old ladies writing letters in colored pencil saying, I wish I could give you more, but this is what I can. And it's a $10 crumpled bill. We take it all. We love it. We appreciate it. And this is what keeps the fight on because we basically unionize retirees. I mean, it's the craziest thing. We did what our unions should be doing.
Yes, it's definitely the case. Okay. Marianne Pizzitola, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate that you took the time to answer these questions thoughtfully and meaningfully. I think this should help a little bit. I feel that this is something everyone should know about, and
absolutely,
it's
well, let's do it again.
This is this far along. I can't imagine that this is what's happened and what's happening. Again, this is Marianne Pizzitola of the Organization of Public Service Retirees. Thank you so much, and have an incredible holiday. And I wish you guys the best of luck with this.
Thank you. Stay with us.
Stay well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.